Hi there, thanks for clicking on my video, and if you have clicked on it, I assume you've got some sort of interest in getting started making wildlife videos. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that a lot of the enjoyment I get is out of appreciating the wildlife that I come across on walks and camps and that sort of thing. But with doing a lot of my video making using my smartphone, you can never really do justice to the wildlife you come across. It's usually just a pinprick on the video. So I watched a video of Simon King's about getting started in wildlife video, and that was quite encouraging. I'm lucky enough that I've got a certain amount of kit, SLRs and lenses and stuff like that that I've put together over the years. Some of it's quite old. There's no way of doing this completely on a budget. You may be able to do something with a prosumer camera with a decent magnification lens, but most of the kit involved is fairly expensive. However, not as expensive as a professional would pay. I mean, the lenses that like a Simon King of this world or a Chris Packham would use are literally thousands and thousands of pounds, and I'm just dabbling in it. I don't want to spend that sort of money. So I looked at my gear. I've got a decent SLR that I've had for a few years. This is a Canon EOS 750D. I think it's the Rebel T7i in a lot of markets. Nice camera. It's got a flip out screen, which is good for video. You can keep an eye on what's going on and framing and all of that sort of thing. And many years ago I purchased this beast second hand. I used to do a lot more bird watching, or more seriously than I do now, and I wanted to get into nature photography, and I bought this second hand for about £350 from a bird watching forum buddy, but never really got into using it. It's got some disadvantages. It's an old lens. It's really designed, I think, for a full-size sensor camera, whereas this is a crop sensor camera that has some advantages and disadvantages. But I'll go into that later when I do a bit of summing up. So those two things, and the other very important thing is a decent tripod. Now, this isn't a very expensive tripod. Again, it's a legacy from my bird watching hobby. It's quite heavy, but then a bit of weight to add some stability isn't such a bad thing. You won't be carrying this on a lightweight wild camp, for example. A decent panning system and a relatively smooth head, so it doesn't judder as you're panning. It's quite important. But it's not. This is a Velbon tripod with a PH157G head. Keen photographers will know that those aren't by any means hugely expensive items, but it's sufficient to get me going. So as I mentioned, if you've got a prosumer camera, you've not got an SLR, if you get yourself a half decent tripod, you can probably give this a go and get similar results to what I got on this first try. So I got my gear together and packed up a rucksack and went down to the local riverbank. So come along with me and see what results I got from my first outing, and then I'll just do a bit of summing up, some lessons learned and pros and cons of the equipment that I've got, and where that leaves me for getting further into wildlife photography, and whether this sort of kit works for it. Okay, so as you can see from that, I didn't see anything especially rare, a couple of nice birds, but you can only film what's in front of you. And it's not such a bad thing practicing on common species and things that you can find locally, because you can get plenty of practice in. So what are my lessons learnt? As I mentioned before, this lens is really designed for a full-size sensor camera. So on a crop sensor camera like this, and also the fact that it's not, because of the price of it, it's still quite expensive. I'll put a link down below to the latest version of this lens. It's still quite an expensive piece of kit, so my £350 that I paid for it is quite a bargain. It's the Sigma 170 to 500, but it's only, I think, f5 to f6.3 depending on where you are in the zoom range, so it doesn't let a huge amount of light in compared to a very, very expensive lens, you know, multiple thousands of pounds. And the result of that is that the autofocus struggles with it on the camera. You know, it's basically useless, so you've got to use the focus ring on the lens. Again, I suppose that has its advantages and disadvantages. You're controlling the focus yourself, but if you've got something that's not moving in the same focal plane as the lens, you know, you're going in and out of focus, so it can be a bit of a struggle, and it's probably going to be a bit of a learning curve to get that right. I imagine that if you spent thousands on a lens and you've got a camera that matches it, that the AI focus mechanisms will be able to track a moving object beautifully. And equipment doesn't make a wildlife photographer. There's a whole lot of skills and experience that go into it, but you know, the top guys don't spend that sort of money for no good reason. But you know, us mere mortals, we're left to try and make use of more modest gear, I guess. So that being said, the pro of using this lens on a crop sensor camera is that it effectively gives a kind of a 1.4 or 1.5 magnification. It's a bit of a cheat really, because you're only sort of getting a portion of the image that you would get in a full-size sensor camera. So you'd be able to use a full-size sensor camera and crop your images and get the same result. But what you're seeing in the viewfinder is effectively 1.4 or 1.5 times 500, if you like. So it's like a 700 millimeter lens. So it really does kind of zoom in quite close. Another disadvantage of this lens, the close focus is around about 9 feet, I think. So not very good for things like dragonflies or insects, that sort of thing. I have got a couple of other lenses that I might be able to put to use and do some of that sort of video work. One of the good things about a Canon camera is they're quite easy to get converters for old lenses. So I've got like a converter for an M42 mount, screw mount lens, and I've got a couple of older lenses that a 135mm lens. It's got quite close focus. I've not tried it for video work, but that might work. So yeah, I think the verdict is that yeah, there's a lot to learn, but enough there for me to have a go of it and try and get a bit better at it. I'd like to take this up on moorland and perhaps get some of those smaller moorland species that, you know, probably a lot of walkers just, you know, they see them flitting in the corner of the eye and they don't take any notice of what they're seeing, and don't realise the beauty that's around them, kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing that I want to get into some of my videos. But yeah, promising, an interesting experiment. I hope it's given you a little bit of insight, and it might be a little while yet because we're heading into winter, at the moment, but I'm going to try and get a few more wildlife videos onto the channel as things develop. So I hope you found that interesting, and if you did, if you do the usual and hit the like button and maybe consider subscribing, I'd much appreciate it. And yeah, see you on the next one. Thanks very much.